Well, folks, we'll give it a minute or two to let people roll in here.
Yes, welcome, welcome everybody. If you're here for appealing your financial aid, you are in you're in the right spot. Understanding and appealing. There we go.
Yes, you're in the right spot for sure. And it tis the season is what we're doing. So if you're, well, I don't know if I have a poll in here, but if you have a senior, this probably is hitting you right between the eyes where you're at right now. And if you're a little younger, you'll still get quite a bit out of this, I think, as far as how to approach it. And having the runway is an important element. Having planning for it and knowing how to position yourself is also important. So.
Yep. And even off the top, I don't know if this is later in your presentation, Joe, but like I was just saying to a family of one of my seniors last week that usually it's like between if a financial aid offer didn't come with your admissions notification or your student's admissions notification, it's usually starting between February and all the way up to April is
Mhm.
first week of April is the window. It's a big window, but that's when you can start to expect financial aid to
Yeah.
come back.
Yeah, I do have a little timeline piece, which I was going to have you comment when we get there to
Good.
like, here's the, because I think we've heard from pretty much everybody for if you're waitlisted or, the big schools, January 15th, I know is a big date for admissions. And so we can put a hit on that because there's a lot of get ready and wait in this process.
Mhm.
So continuing to have patient persistence is something I have on my slides of, you got to be a little bit patient, but if you're going to try for more aid, you got to be persistent and patient. Um, so they'll have a bed for you if they made you an offer. They'll have a bed. You don't need to put down the $400. So we'll get into that. So we'll go ahead and get rolling because I think this will kind of all just snowball into what we're doing. So Amber, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I'll go real quick.
Hello, everybody. I'm Amber Gilsdorf, and I am a college planning consultant with Estrella Consulting. I am one of a team of four. Each of us have usually between 20 to 25 students per grade level, and we work very much like A to Z with our families, helping them navigate the college application, college essay process, and then understanding final decisions, financial aid packages. But we certainly do not pretend to be specialists on financial aid, nor do we go as in depth as what Joe does. But welcome tonight. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having us. And we've been doing this series, and we've got a couple more coming, I think. But yeah, stay tuned. We're trying to just as these things are happening throughout the year. Um, Stay tuned. We got another one on strategically paying the bill. So I kind of didn't get into that today. We're going to go big picture, but not how that'll be kind of a whole another deep dive on now that we know the bill and we're committed. How do we more strategically pay it? We'll hit a high level, but not too deep tonight. So Capstone Wealth Partners is my firm and based out of Dublin. We serve clients nationwide. We've been around. This is our 16th year. So first 15 were fun. The next 15 should be even more fun. Yeah. So we're a six-person team, kind of a boutique firm, but we do college financial planning for college-bound families is really one of my focuses. But we encourage families not to look at college in a vacuum. Thinking about retirement, your other goals, your other kids. If this is your first one, and then how do we invest to make all this work? And one of my kind of things that I say frequently is we help people don't leave a tip for the bursar's office and don't leave a tip for the IRS. And that's kind of when we talk about tax aware and tax smart college planning. So we're an independent firm, similar to Australia. Like I said, we've been around since 2010. If you're looking for advice, I always advocate for fee-only fiduciaries and looking for that CFP mark, Certified Financial Planner mark is that's how we try to sit on the same side of the table as our clients, and we only work for our clients. So that's what we advocate for. And if you're looking for a second opinion on things or some advice on how to get through this, we're going to give you lots of DIY stuff tonight, some calculators, some tools, all that. But if you're looking for some extra help, certainly reach out. That's my hard pitch for the evening. Um, we mentioned we've kind of how we partner together on financial fit and really I think Estrella does a good job with financial fit at a high level, but when it gets to hey, how do we make this special circumstance appeal? How do we reflect on taxes? Some of that gets a little beyond, and that's where having a financial professional come in can really add some help. So, but the social fit and the academic fit hopefully are done if you've worked with Estrella through this. You feel really good about the list that you had, but now it's kind of like we're at decision time, and part of that, a big part of that is the financial aspect. So we're going to go through and hopefully put together. I try to kind of structure things a way of like it is kind of a busy slide. I get to make it prettier, but understand and challenge your aid package. So I put together basically here's some high level things we need to think about. Here's some fundamentals, some block and tackling that really fall into your merit and your need based understanding your aid package. But these are things I kind of a little bit of gotchas when as we go through actually samples of financial aid award letters, you'll see how wildly different they are. And you may not even experience this yet. But so we're going to talk about watch out for front-loaded financial aid awards. So it's a front-loaded. It's only for the first year. It's a $2,000 grant or scholarship. So that's one you just want to make sure, and that leads into two is are they renewable? Meaning, hey, are these renewable for 4 and sometimes 5 years? I don't really like to plan for 5 years, but if a school's graduation rate is 50% or less, maybe they need to be offering scholarships for 5 years. Because if they're not, that fifth year becomes really one of the most important aspects or important elements because your scholarship goes away. But you're too close to the finish line, you're not going to leave now. So understanding that and like really, this is a commitment. It's a body of work to get to this degree. That's what we're investing in. So it's not a 1 year deal, it's a 4 year deal to get to the degree. What's the cost to get there? So keep that in mind as we go. A big thing is what is self-help? What is gift aid? How sometimes self-help, which is resources that can help you pay for college, but they do not reduce your cost of college. So we'll go through how to recognize those and kind of throw them out. And so some schools do really well with presenting that, and some schools don't. Um, and then what's the out-of-pocket price? Clearly that's where we're at now is what are we going to be expected to pay out of pocket? I'm going to go through an exercise. Like I said, it's a deeper dive on how do you strategically fund all 4 years, but I will go through a couple of high-level things to think through with how to think about loans and cash flow and some things like that. So, and I have a note there. Don't forget, tuition typically goes up. Your scholarships typically stay the same. So that's a thing to think about, and we'll show that. And then at the end of the day, you have to know your budget for school for all 4 years to know what your potential loan total might be. And I think that's lost in the equation because you get these financial aid order letters, but we have to be thinking, okay, now I need to extrapolate that over the 4 years. But then if we know our budget, we know what that total 4 year cost is, then we can say, what's our loan? And more importantly, maybe what's our loan payment? Is that going to be something that we can handle either helping our student or our student can handle that when they're done? So that's, I call it oftentimes a college crystal ball. And now we're at the finish line. So, and then we'll wrap up with, hey, if we have all this stuff, how do we know if we can go make either a special circumstance appeal, which is more on a need basis, our financial circumstances have changed, or appeal competitively? So we'll go through kind of things I guess we've learned over the years to get success there, and the differences and what might be a good appeal and how to approach it. Uh, Anything you want to add there? It's high level, but I've got some groundwork to lay. So
I think my quick high level would be on your point about the 5 years. If your student is really considering a school that requires or highly encourages co-ops, that is usually a top thing. Like University of Cincinnati here in Ohio, where I'm based, like that is a co-op school for many of their engineering and computer science programs, especially, but a lot of other majors too. That's
hmm
going to add time, if not a half year, another year. So that's
yeah,
my cautionary, like with co-ops. And then I did want to add, we should have said at the top, if you have questions along the way, you can drop them into the Q&A, and then I'll monitor that and I'll answer what I can to you in that moment. And then we'll have questions at the end live.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and this is being recorded. I should have said that too. I forgot to do the housekeeping. Didn't do the housekeeping. It's being recorded, so we'll send out these resources we talked about tonight. You'll get the slide deck, the recording, all that stuff. And again, so if you're gonna do a DIY this, then you'll have, I think, good tools to do so. Cool. All right, so let's dive in. This is kind of the timeline. I talk about get ready and wait a lot. We're going off to school here in the fall this year. It's 26 now. We did our admissions all the way back, applications all the way back starting in August. Schools are taking still admit applications, by the way. So as you'll see, if you get to some schools and you don't have any competitive ones, go apply to another school that might give you a better offer. That's not over yet. So there are schools like really actively still trying to get their seats full, and they don't know, and that's why they're pressuring you with, get your stuff to us, get in your deposit, otherwise you won't have a bed. So that's not going to happen. So kind of the way this rolls out is we've applied and then we wait, right? So well, if you want to talk to just a little bit on those folks that make that decision to do an early decision and how
Mhm.
that timeline is going to differ a little and how it folds in here.
Yes, so if you're a parent of a junior or a sophomore, if your student applies through an early decision application plan, which early decision means binding, students can only apply to one school early decision. Usually they have a November 1st deadline as well. And that agreement is saying that if I'm admitted, I will attend your school. Early decision benefits colleges because it's a slam dunk guaranteed customer. They know that you're coming if they admit you. And as Joe just said, colleges often now, not your top 50, not your top 100. Those are not schools that are maybe struggling year to year to fill all their seats.
Yeah.
But just below that tier, often schools are really wanting to know who's a slam dunk customer. So those students would find out usually right before the winter holidays that they've been admitted. Often, a financial aid award letter will be included in that admissions decision if you've applied for aid by the application deadline for early decision as
Mhm.
well. But often, part of the challenge with early decision is you are agreeing up front that you're going to go. Now, what I do know, it's not something that colleges will advertise, and it's not something every school will do, but you can request of the financial aid office if your student is thinking about an early decision application. You can ask in advance, like in the summer, if they might do a pre-read to give you a sense of what you might qualify from them. There's calculators and things you can do too, but that specific school that your student might ED at, you can ask for that. No guarantee they'll do it, but you can ask. And then your student's applying ED with a more informed, sense of what the financial aid might look like. That's the risk of ED. You're binding yourself in maybe without knowing the exact bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. So that financially read the net price calculator on the website is a good tool. Um, and I think I have it in here, but it is a good way to hold them accountable if you don't get a good offer. So
Yes.
doing that at price calculator now, before you even maybe have your financial aid award letter, you know what went into your FAFSA and your profile. I usually encourage people to go get it at price calculator from that school. I mean, you hopefully already have a good idea, but you want to make sure you get a fair shake and you get the right type of aid offered. So, because like where we're at in this process, we'll come back to the analysis and how you put it all together. But you will get that acceptance, and even if you're not early decision, you'll typically get an acceptance and hey, here's your initial scholarship offer. So it won't be a full financial aid award letter. That's the thing to be aware of. It doesn't mean that's all you're going to get. But if you're not a need-based candidate, that's probably all you're going to get.
Mhm. Yep.
You may be invited to apply also in this period to say, hey, you've gotten the $30,000 per year scholarship, or the presidential scholarship. We're also inviting you to apply for the Admiral Scholarship for another 15,000. So for full ride. So those things are happening right now. Most of those are kind of already being shaken out, where you probably have, even if you were invited to some of those, you probably have that answer by now as well. And now you're kind of, like I said, getting ready and waiting because the full financial aid award letter, smaller schools get them out sooner, just because they have less to process. But they need to know who's committing, getting everything from the FAFSA and the federal, and then they got to process those, and then your full financial aid award package comes, which includes scholarships as well as need-based financial aid. So from federal, state, and the school. So just if you've I said, like, if you're on this line, if you are a financial aid candidate, you know that. If you have a scholarship offer, hold on, because you might be getting more. So just continue to, until they get you that award letter. And if you're not, this is the time you need to begin to appeal to other schools for more scholarship money. So if you know you're not a financial aid candidate, say your student aid index is well above what the school costs, you want to begin that process now because those dollars will go up, that will go. So we'll talk about how to do that well and how the difference between the two. But if you've got scholarship offers, start tomorrow with your appeal process. We'll talk through how to do that. And then decision day, officially, unofficially, is May 1st. So it's still kind of it's a nice to have for the school. But it's not. They can't require you. But it's a good idea to stay on that timeline because that gives you also some clarity. Let's just get done with this thing. Let's plan where we're going. Let's go be a tiger. Let's go be whatever that mascot is. Let's get moving. So hopefully tonight will give you some ability to have a runway to get through that. Just high level financial aid eligibility, because we'll talk the need-based side. So they're looking at the cost of the college for the year minus your student aid index, which is made up of all those green things below, basically income and assets of the parent and the student. That's going to be your eligibility at that school. So that's where when I say run a student aid index calculator, you should have that from your FAFSA. But if you have a school that also has the CSS profile, you're going to want to have that number, which could be different. So if you're eligible for aid or not, that's a key thing to know at this point at each institution. I had a call earlier today where they are eligible. Their student aid index is around 60,000, but they're applying to some $100,000 schools. So those schools, yes, we're gonna hold off and see what we get from need-based aid. But some of those schools, the scholarship would have put it well below their student aid index, so they're not going to get need-based aid. So you can begin to kind of eliminate those things, and it's okay because we go focus on the scholarships and give them the most money we can. So that's just high level. If you qualify for need-based aid, wanted to throw that in because we know how we find schools. We're going to talk about merit-based. How do we get those scholarships? How do we potentially get more? And what that appeal looks like. And then on the need-based side, it's a little more complicated in the way they represent it with gift aid, which is grants and scholarships, but it's also self-help, which is student loans and work study. So when we talk about deciphering the financial aid award letter, you don't want to you want to cut through the noise, I guess is what I try to do. Get to like what are we actually going to need to pay? That self-help stuff is great. It'll help us pay for college, but it doesn't reduce the cost. Um, so hitting on the loan piece for a minute, which is for a lot of schools, the first way that they award need-based aid is with subsidized federal direct loans. So those loans are reasonable interest rates. They will be, if you filed the FAFSA, they will be on your financial aid award letter. They can be subsidized or unsubsidized. So if they're subsidized, it means that they are a loan that you don't pay interest while you're in school. So those are kind of a no-brainer if you get them. Even if you've got the money, you might as well take it. It's a 1% up front, but you might as well keep that money on hand, even if you have it. So, and the unsubsidized, pretty reasonable rates, 6.53 now. And then the maximum over the 4 years is 27,000. The key I always try to point out for families, if it's subsidized or unsubsidized, understand if you need loans at all, you might want to consider taking them in year one because they're use it or lose it. So you can't say, hey, we've got the money for freshman, sophomore year, we'll just figure it out later. Well, figuring out that out later usually means either private loans or a Parent Plus loan. So you're better off to know, hey, what do we need in loans total? Should we consider go ahead and taking this all in the student's name, no cosigner required? If there's any loans to be forgiven, these are the ones that are going to get it, right? So if you need more than 27,000, I typically would say go ahead and start using that from day one. Even though you might not need it for year one, it sounds like different than what we would typically think, but that's a strategy to know that that's the capital that's there for you. Um, and so, and from a loan perspective, like we just kind of put some guardrails around it. If you're looking at comparing these award letters side by side, how much loan is too much loan? And usually our benchmark is if you take out more loans than you're going to make your first year out in that major, that's too much. You're just not going to be able to repay it. So that's kind of the key we put here. If you can get out of school, if your student get out of school with just a federal direct student loan, they're going to be just fine. It's about a $275 to $300 a month payment, and if that's their part of contributing to their cost of college, that's a reasonable loan amount in today's world. It's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but in today's world, if they can get out with just that, that's pretty good. And you can always help them pay that back. You can always help pay that back, but leveraging that loan throughout, they're going to be just fine. But we know that If they go up and above, especially with some of the new income-based repayment plans, which I won't get too into, they're requiring much more than they did a year ago for people, even at the minimum levels, even if they're not making a lot of money, they're requiring up to 15% as opposed to used to be 10. So even more important than before. And then on the federal direct parent plus loan, um, this is an outdated slide. Sorry about that. It's kind of relevant though, because this year, with the federal direct parent plus loan, the family could take out up to the full cost of attendance minus the aid. That's changing going forward. So in 2026 and going forward, that's changing. So it used to be if they give you, hey, we cost 50,000, here's 25,000 off. You can take this Parent Plus loan for 25,000, and then that would be each year. That's changing now because it's going to be capped at 20,000, 20,000 and 65,000 total over four is the most you can take from that Parent Plus program. So 20,000 per year, but a maximum of 65 over four. So you can't take 20 each year. So just keep that in mind. It's usually not a great interest rate, and it has a high origination fee. So kind of the tax on the front end of it's 4.2. So if you have good credit, you probably want to look elsewhere because that's based on the rates are based on people that have about a 400 or 500 credit score. So if you've got home equity line of credit or other ways to access dollars through other areas that you might want to consider. So the trap though is, like I said, I've had very smart people that have the money go ahead and say, yeah, we'll just take that plus loan and we'll just pay it back next month or something. But you paid 4.2% up front to do that. So be very cautious the way it's presented as if it's financial aid, because it is technically, but make no mistake, it's a loan. So I wanted to point those things out because as we get into looking at these award letters, you'll see what that becomes important of how they present those. Okay, and then yeah, private loans. There will be increased amounts of private loans out there because some of the changes have been made to the Parent Plus loan, as well as graduate programs, which I won't get into tonight. But private loans are with a bank, and I can tell you, I haven't seen one in a long time that didn't require a cosigner. Could be you as a parent or a grandparent, but even if the student leads that charge, if that's the only way you can see a path forward to pay for this school, just know that those private loans require a cosigner to make those loans yours, essentially. And those are loans that they don't have forgiveness on them. There's nothing. They're not going to forgive those loans. So be cautious of getting in over your head with those. And private loans, I have seen people tap out, meaning that cosigner didn't have great credit, student doesn't have any credit. By the senior year, they said we're not giving you any more loans. So that's a problem. So just make sure that's why we're going to try and make an informed decision here. That salary stuff matters because as we're going through and we're seeing out what's it cost to get to this degree, the return on that same investment in education may have a much higher payoff with different majors. So thinking about, is it worth a premium to go to one school over another? Well, if their average starting salaries are over 100,000 and this other school is at 70, I got to kind of weigh that. Is the outcome better? That's how I think about that. Is it worth paying a premium for some schools over another in that chosen major? And the answer sometimes is yes, but a lot of times probably not. If you're going to be an educator or be a school counselor, like you're going to make the same. It doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or if you went to Columbus State. And you're going to have to get a master's degree as well, by the way, to do those things. So, most of our good school districts, I think it's crazy, but education is one of our lowest paid uh, careers, but yet they have to go get another a degree on top of there. So just think about that and the whole body of work of getting to that job that your student wants to. If it's a physical therapist or if there's 5-year programs. So, do they need to go to grad school to have that kind of job? So, because I think Amber, you can comment here, but like graduate school, thinking about what's the body of work to get to that targeted career, you got to think about that in this process. I'll let you kind of comment on that.
Yes, there's frequently, families will say, like, as Joe was commenting, like the premium, if my student goes to Washington University in St. Louis, kind of the Ivy League school of the Midwest, if you will, to get their undergrad degree, but they want to go to law school. I had this exact situation, and it was going to cost that student 45,000 a year to go to Wash U to then go on to law school after that, compared to Ohio State, where a lot of, law schools, they have just as many students admitted to law school from state universities that they do from super highly selective schools. So that is part of this process. You've got to factor in the total amount of time. And then I always tell families if the student isn't 100% sure exactly what they want to do in terms of a career, look at 2 to 3 of them that they're considering or that they might like, and then figure out like maybe an average starting salary of those three. And then that can help you gauge what to borrow in terms of amount.
Yeah. Yeah. So and this isn't perfect, but at least if you have a target and you're like, we know it's engineering, it's one of these things, but if you don't, if it's, I think we will see the rise of the liberal arts education. We're already starting to see it because of technology doing so much for us in a lot of areas that our employers are looking for thinkers. They're looking for people that are wired that way, trained that way. So solve difficult problems that computers can't, which may sound crazy because what I did on Gemini today, I was like, wow, that was crazy. But these things are evolving. They will continue to, but some of them won't. So hopefully that's a helpful framing of kind of where these things shake out from self-help to understanding those. And the part I drive home, especially maybe for a little younger, and even for people that are at the finish line, is that they're going to look at your financials to determine your need-based eligibility. They're going to look at your academics to determine if you get scholarships. But you can't change the aid policy of the institution. And what I mean by that is some schools just simply don't offer scholarships,
Yep.
and that's a lot of our top schools. So I get a call a couple times a year, this time of year, January, February. Well, they got into Columbia. I thought they would get a scholarship. I was like, well, I could have told you they won't, and they would have told you they won't because they don't offer them, nor do any of the Ivies. And there's a not a long list, but a lot of top schools. So that's a tough pill to swallow, and it's a tough conversation to have once your student has that acceptance letter. And I feel for you. I do because that's tough. But so again, if you're on the younger side of this, understand what you would get in the form of scholarships and or need-based aid at different schools side by side, and you can get a read on that early. Um, so I don't know if you want to tell any heartbreak stories, Amber, but I know we've shared
No,
those together.
I
So
don't want to bum people out. But I tell families often the number one thing that's going to influence your overall bottom line is the schools on the list on the front end. This is
mhm,
not a figure out how to pay for it when you finally get the yes. It's got
mhm.
to be thought out in advance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I encourage like this is I call it a pretty simple exercise. We've got a worksheet I'll send out with this on it with blanks, but to get to understanding what your loans will be, what your out of pocket versus what you're still going to owe, you need to have a budget going in. And that's not all savings. So when you're looking at, you can decipher them all you want. No, you need to pay 250,000, but where does that leave you? So doing this exercise of what do we have in 529s? What are we contributing now? And could we continue those contributions? So consider that part of cash flow. Do we have other assets that we might have earmarked for college as parents, be that a mutual fund or stocks from work or something like that? And putting that on here for this student. I should have, reiterate, this is for this student because a lot of times what you would do for one, you like to do for all in most cases. But then the cash flow becomes a really important element because considering what you're already saving, just assume you can continue doing that because it doesn't change your lifestyle. But other things that are going to be not coming out of your fridge, like a meal plan, paying for club hockey, if you're used to that, if you're paying for private school, those things that you're used to paying, factor those in as cash flow into, hey, oh yeah, we're used to, and a lot of times it comes up to, $500 to $1,000 once you put all those things together and think about it. It's once a week. You're paying for hotels and this and that. And it goes out the pocket, but a lot of times that's a meaningful number that can help keep loans down. And schools have zero interest payment plans. Some of them present that on the award letter, some don't. But some even will say, I also have a sample in here, actually, it'll show you, hey, if you'd like to pay this in 10 installments, here's your payment. So just know that that's available out there. And then do you expect the student to work? Because the work study conversation is going to be part of a lot of financial aid award letters that come out. If they have any assets, that's great if they've saved it, but getting clear on, hey, that's going towards tuition. Or if you go here, it doesn't have to go towards tuition. You can keep that for other stuff. But if you go here, we expect you to use that for your college costs. And then cash flow wise, it's the conversation of one, do you expect them to work? And two is, does that go directly towards tuition or is that more for walking around money? Because if walking around money, it doesn't get on this sheet, right? So if you expect them, we're going to get your tuition and your apartment, but you're going to be responsible for your food. Like hey, that's because that food cost is in here, so that would count here. And then the other one is we're at a point like if you're still having trouble talking to your parents about money, now's the time. We need to know if it's 5,000 or 5,000 a year because it's a very different number. And then that could bring certain schools into play and make other ones out of play. That one element. So getting clear on what is it, where does it sit. So hopefully it's a helpful exercise. What are you going to put in? What do you expect from the kids? And is there any outside help? So those are the big three. And then even down to those loans we were looking at, if that's the participation from the student, I think our students are more acutely aware of the student loan crisis. They're hearing about it from their older friends that, yeah, so letting them know, helping them be informed, not be surprised when they get that 27,000 of loans. I think it's just important to say, hey, we're going to put in X. You got these scholarships, good for you, but we're going to need these loans. That's going to be your part of paying for education. That's okay. I know we all want to put our kids through school without any loans, but it's just really not very common these days. So hopefully that's a helpful exercise. All right, so we're going to get into looking at some of these wonderful financial aid award letters that I've anonymized or picked up from different school websites. So this one I haven't marked up really at all. It's going to kind of give you some definitions, but so once you get these coming in, you'll see they're going to look very different. So this one I give like a C minus, maybe a D, just because it's not very clear. Because they show your aid first, which I'm like, well, what's the cost? Like I'd rather know that first, in my opinion. So, but they're saying, okay, here's your for the year, you're gonna get some Pell grants, this Cal grant, a Bobcat grant. So your total for the year is 25. And then you also have this self-help, which is loans and work study. So they really loaded up this federal work study, which, by the way, work study is not guaranteed. You still got to apply. There still has to be a job available. But it is a federal stipend, so that it's not taxable, which sounds great. But most kids, unless you make over $15,000, you're not going to pay taxes anyway. So if you're better off to go wait tables or do something else with that time, work study isn't always the best paying job you can get, and they're not guaranteed. So I usually just throw them out when I'm doing like looking at what's our cost. I just throw them out. So we've got this here, and then if we come down here, your ways are determined based on the following. You're living on campus. This is a zero EFC, but here's your tuition and fees, and here's your books, supplies, et cetera, room and board, transportation, and your health insurance. Where does it show me what does it cost? I
No,
mean,
no.
can you just do the math for us? So to me, this is a very vague, uh, very vague. So, if we tally all those up, it's 16, 18. Yeah, it's around 30, 35, 36,000. But I'm just sitting here going, why? And so then part of that self-help. So what's my out of pocket? This is a tough one to decipher to me. It's pretty tough. So I'm
Yeah.
starting with one that is, so you need a tool to levelize all these side by side and plug in the same inputs and get the same outputs. Because this one's not good. But you might see something like this. So be aware of that one. This one is I think better on how it lays things out, but it's still, at least it shows the direct costs at the bottom, but at least it shows the gift aid. Here's our self-help. Again, really high work study, which I wouldn't even think about. You do have subsidized loans and unsubsidized. That's clearly represented. I think that's good because, like I said, if they are subsidized, you might as well take them. And then coming down here, what's our tuition and fees? And then estimating direct costs. So that at least they kind of have a final on it. And then they say minus your gift. And that's your estimated net cost minus your true gift money up there, right? And then you get into, and if you take out the self-help, then remaining financial aid due to be used for other expenses. Love that part because that is really poorly misrepresented because they're saying take all the loans and we're going to definitely have that work study and you're going to have extra money laying around. To me, that's just not a very good way to present that because you don't have to take those loans. If you don't have to, don't. So And I've heard those stories too. Like it came, especially people in graduate school. They're like, yeah, they said I could take out, 40,000 a year. So I took out 40,000 a year. I said, well, how much did you need? I don't know, 20. So then you end up with tens of thousands of dollars potentially in loans that you didn't really need. So understand, I just feel like this isn't a very fair representation. But if you're reading it, you're going, cool, we're going to have extra money left from college? Not really.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's a good example of just kind of how deceptive these can be. And then I think I've got some ones that I think are better. I think are kind of the next one. This one gets like a B plus because it does show fairly clearly. Here's your grants and scholarships. Here's your estimated cost of attendance. But again, it's throwing that financial aid in those loans are part of it. So I don't think that's very fair. And then here's your total estimated balance that you're gonna have to come up with, the 21,881. So, and I pulled this one because it shows if you want to make monthly payments over 10 or 12 months, here's what that looks like. So that I think is helpful, but the fact that they put these loans in there, I don't think is a great true what your estimated balance. It's not saying what your net cost is. There's a difference there, right? Because the net cost would really be this plus your student loans, right? It would really so it's semantics, but the fact that we have to still decipher these is the crazy thing to me, without a standardized way to do it. But hopefully those are helpful examples of how things are presented and making sure that you know how to break them down. I'm gonna go to out here a couple of tools I found and then some good samples. This is from the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. So if you want to do a paper version, here's one, two, three side by side. Take your top three schools, pull them, put them in here, and take out, make sure the cost of attendance matches up. Get whatever fees and look at these things and see if they're crazy. Like if they have a transportation fee or of something like 5,000, be like, I don't know if we need travel and transportation of 5,000, but take what's on there, get down to the cost of attendance, have that apples to apples, and then it's got scholarships and grants. Here's your gift aid. Here's your cost minus gift aid. Right. So then it's even got some, are you going to work? And so, but then the loans, how does that factor in? So this is it's a way to look at things on a side by side.
Yep.
So hopefully that's a helpful tool that we'll send out. And then is this the right one? That's over here. So this is the one that has been pushed to standardize things, which if every school could just have to present it like this, which I don't know why they can't. This seems like the easiest thing in the world to make it a template. But this one
Yep.
really does the best way to do it. What's the cost? Right, here's the cost of attendance for the year, right? And it does and then it breaks it down. So total estimated cost, all in 31.5. Here's your fall semester, here's your spring. And then what we're looking at here's your grant money, merit-based scholarship, institutional scholarship. You've got Pell grants. That one you don't see very often anymore, but you got a state grant, you've got merit, institutional, but all told, your total discount is 21,995. Right. So that leaves us now with the estimated net price of 9,521. And then here's some self-help that could help you pay for college. But I like that it's isolated. And then here's your outstanding after you would apply those loans that you might need to come up with. And then and I like how they put work study down here, like not even included.
Yep.
So that's how I would kind of analyze this. So this sample, I think, is a good way to look at it, and their worksheet does the same thing. It gets you to kind of the same outcome. So hopefully that's helpful in deciphering and having some good examples of how to look at it and not get taken. So the one thing you didn't see, and I don't think in any of these, it might be in this one. No, it wasn't in this one either. There had some other. That was the sample. Was the Parent Plus loan and how that plays into things. So just be cautious. Some of those schools will present that like any of those other tools. That hey, you could take out this $20,000 Parent Plus loan as well. So I just don't get yeah don't take the bait. So I'll shift gears and we'll get into the appeal process because once you have your baseline and you're going to want to have those schools stacked up side by side, here's what they cost, go through that exercise. And now we can begin to think about, okay, so now that we have schools stacked up side by side, do we have a special circumstance appeal? and then I'll get into merit appeals to wrap us up. So these are the main things that they have listed that you can special circumstance if someone passes away, separation or divorce, loss of a job got downsized or shrunk, um, change in job, loss of child support, like that one, all child support goes away. That's kind of a weird one, but so you can kind of see excessive medical expenses. So basically, if there's when we look at how you file your financial aid forms, they're looking at the prior tax year. So you're going off to school in the fall of 26, but they were looking at your 2024 tax return, right? So a lot can change in that period. All these things can change. So if your 2024 taxes don't represent your current financials, you probably have a reason to appeal. These are the most common ones, but that's the most common, like if you have a chance. So what I typically advise is so for special circumstance appeal, do some of your homework. So go to the school's net price calculator, or you can use ours too for the college money report. We'll give that, and then so get at least hey if I simulated what my 2025 income was, not 24 but 25, and you may know that already. I would say file your taxes early for 25 because that's the easiest way to go get your special circumstance appeal done. So if you can get your taxes in for 25 and say, hey, 24 we made 190,000, 25 we only made 80, or whatever that difference is. That's the easiest way to make a really good appeal for special circumstance. So you're going to want to follow their guidance is the just kind of the note I put in there. Because most school you're required to have a special circumstance appeal process now. So some schools have tried to say that they don't, but we've assured them that they do. So from a results standpoint, you're going to need to follow their process. I think I pulled up. Yeah. So this is just UC. I think they have a website dedicated to it. So if you have whatever your school is, Google's your friend. Just say University of Cincinnati Special Circumstance Appeal. It'll pull up for you. So that's what I did to find this. I don't know where it's at. I don't have a bookmark. It's just so they want to, in my experience, the financial aid office as well as these folks, they really do want to get people the aid that they need. Smaller colleges and universities are probably better at it just because of the less number. But understand these aren't like people like they're sitting there like they don't want to give you any money. If you've got a legitimate special circumstance, they do want to help. So they are very cognizant of trying to avoid the bad actors as well. But if you've got a legitimate reason, they're going to have that, and they're going to tell you submitting an appeal. Here's how you do it: professional judgment, special circumstance, student aid index appeal. So professional judgment's a key. You're not looking to negotiate. You're looking for them to, give you a professional judgment because what was reported is not our current situation. And then it talks about here's what you can expect and kind of expectations. So having documentation, having your ducks in a row. That's why I say having your 25 tax return done if you're going for a to have an appeal right now is the best way to have that done. And then I think you have to and theirs you have to have submitted the FAFSA, and then they're going to look for income, and they might even dig into expenses. So having your tax returns, what your expenses look like, what your debts might look like, anything that justifies your appeal. And I think they have a letter. If they don't have a letter, they've got I think they do though. There's a portal. So everything's run through the portal. That's another thing with all of this stuff. I didn't kind of hit on that, but like all of this stuff is going to be reported through the portal. Some of them are still sending emails and sending letters, but the financial aid portals are kind of the truth. That's where you're going to get your bottom lines, and you're going to continue to use that throughout college. So checking in there, that's where things will happen. Yeah, and I think they have a submit a letter of appeal, but they also have a form. So if they ask for a letter, appeal. I mean, get a letter together. So, and I'll send this out tomorrow, but this is one we had success with because of some unexpected changes, and we used their net price calculator. And essentially, was this Nova? Yeah. So essentially, this family went through some changes with some divorce and a number of things, but the situation that they reported on FAFSA is it's not it they qualified for a lot more, and we knew that. But when the financial aid award letter come, it certainly didn't show that. So even though this school has, they take what's called the CSS profile. There's a section on there. They try to describe it. of, if you do that ahead of time, and it's a question I get frequently, well, do we put that in there? Like, hey, do you have any extenuating circumstances? And I typically do not. I've just had better success going back to the school and pleading my case this time of year with the school directly. Because there's nowhere on there does it allow you to put in an updated tax return. So in this case, this was a similar, like a lot of things changed. Here's what's happened. And we need to reassess it. And essentially it was 40,000 more for the year. So for the year, it's 40,000 more. So these can be successful. This one was a concrete example of how that could work out. So um, we can hit questions, but that's special circumstance. Follow their process. Do your homework. Have the documentation, and get hopefully get it done. And they, like I said, a lot of times they do want to help. Just follow their process. Okay, so a lot of people probably stuck around to get competitive appeal process and success. So this is an art and a science, I would say. So if you're looking to get competitive appeals, the process actually usually begins with the schools you're applying to. That's thing number one. And you want to get a read on the front end. If you do visits, get an expectation of what type of scholarships might we get. And then I would say too, a lot of times if you're not a need-based candidate, and you know this is really your only opportunity for free money, understand try to get them to commit to what they will actually you would get in scholarship. And a lot of times that's difficult for them unless they have more of a grid type process, like we see in schools, quite frankly, in the South. Alabama and Tennessee, a lot of them, if you do this, you'll get this. So understanding what you need to do to get these scholarships is important. I had a very talented student, 4.2, busy athlete. He was applying to a school that was test optional, and they've gotten back their financial aid stuff. And she said, "Well, he's such a good student. Why didn't he get any scholarship?" I said, "Well, they require an ACT or an SAT. They'll admit him, but there's no scholarships for you. They tell you in plain, it's right there. It says, you need to have an ACT, SAT, and the GPA. So yes, it's optional to submit that test score, but it's not optional if you want scholarships. So that's a tough
And
pill.
yeah, that's not true at every school. Students
Mhm.
can still get scholarships if they apply test optional, but we have noticed we keep a lot of internal data, um, and we see that students who submit test scores tend to get a higher dollar amount in
Mhm.
scholarships than those who do not. Now, good test scores, of course, but that's incentive for students to take the testing process seriously.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's just knowing on the front end, like, do they require it or not, and is it some schools, even their scholarships are GPA only. So, it just depends on the school. But when you build your school list, understand if we want to get scholarships, what's required to get those. And a lot of times it's a combination or it's so just be aware of that if you want it competitive. And then building your list, if you want to appeal for more money, you may have schools you apply to that you don't really have an interest in going to if you know they're going to give you a high scholarship. And I'll show you some examples here in a second. So a couple key points I make: student needs to lead the process. Parents can support them, right? But the student needs to lead the process. I put like have genuine interest and a compelling competing offer is the best way to get the most money. And so starting the process, find your advocate. So understand the financial aid process and getting need-based aid is going to go through the financial aid office, but these appeals are going to go through the admissions and the scholarship committee. So really, it sounds funny, but they are a different office, and the money comes from a different pot. Ultimately, they come together in the end, but just understanding that's important. So your advocate, it's typically whoever your admissions counselor was that you had from the university. That's your first stop, unless you have been to a camp and you've got a professor. But that admissions person, their job is to get people to enroll. So they if they've given you at admissions and they've already given you a pretty good scholarship offer, they're the one you want to go back to and say, not give me more money. You want to say, I simply start with an email or a call and say, what's the process to be considered for more scholarship money? So just learn what the process is. Some are more formal than others. So, but oftentimes it's, well, give us your documentation of why you think this makes sense. And with competing offers, that's the easiest way. But sometimes if you just got no scholarship, like, hey, you just blanked me. And I think I'm a good, darn good student. I think I should get, I deserve something. So I'll go through one of those. So when we look at, it's down here. I'm putting those for samples, but this is a successful appeal at Syracuse. But we had really good other letters in hand from good schools, and there was several more. But the idea there was, look, we really want to come to your school, but you gave us zero discount. This family actually did have dollars to pay, but it's like this student earned it. So to give nothing, we thought was pretty egregious. And but ultimately they came back with $10,000. We asked for 15. So in a letter we asked for 15. They came back and said we're going to offer you 10, and we said that would be good. So that ten was a $40,000. For a few hours work. Student really did lead the process and wrote a really compelling letter. So I'm going to pop back out here. I think this is it. So these appeal letters are just phrased differently, but when I talk about kind of the elements, be grateful, show that you're really interested in going to that campus. Be grateful for the generous offer. Like here with this, they gave him 31. This is University of Dayton in this particular one, top choice, but the gap makes it difficult. I want nothing more to come, but I would need another 7,000 to make the cost comparable to other and more affordable for our family. So you put a little personal situation. If you've been to a camp, if you have some demonstrated interest in that college, absolutely go and talk to them. Put that in there. I've been coming here since I was a freshman or, in high school, and I love it. And I've come to camps and whatever those things are. These schools do value how committed you are to coming and being a good part of their community. So this one came back with 5,000 more from Dayton. So, but the reason really came down to for this was the starting point. So just tying these all together, I'm going into some of my reports here. This is just a sample student. It's an actual, we just kind of mimicked some of the information, but we're going to go through. So we're going to go through and put together all these schools on a side by side. So this is, they were looking predominantly at faith-based schools. So you see St. Joe's and St. John's and TCU and Dayton. I think Xavier is on their list. And they had a mix at Notre Dame. So, a number of different schools and different types of schools. And you can see, here's the cost to attend. Here's their gift. I threw everything else out, and then here's your remaining cost. Right? So that's really what you want to break down and see. Well, how are we looking? And then it really gets into how do we look at this on a side by side? Well, if we come down here, you really want to look at like this to see here's the net cost, here's the budget, here's our gap. And then if I sort by the gap, it begins to show us here's the school, here's our budget, here's our funding gap, here's our loan payment. Full transparency through the process. You can see coming on down here, this is a good budget, right? So 168,000, still got to come up with that. There's some schools, a lot of these fall in a range, but then they jump. So TCU gave them a decent scholarship, but it still leaves them with a huge jump to get competitive there. So like in this case, what we're looking at is if I want to go to Denver, right? We know that it's going to cost us 27,000 more. I'm going to go back to Dayton and ask for more money. And this is the reason why. I've got these other comparable schools that are competing for me, right? So that's kind of the idea with how do we have a similar starting price and have a bottom line. The funding gap is just wildly different. So that could be understanding which schools fall into the same bucket. So another good one is St. John's. We actually have a surplus 166 versus St. Joe's down the street 198. It's costing us almost 35,000 more. They have almost the same sticker price. I'm going back to St. Joe's if that's my target school and ask them for more money. So that's kind of but if you can do this homework, it makes it a lot easier to say, you don't need to tell them your budget. You just need to show them that, hey, when we look at those awards side by side, it's just not, we can't do it. So, hopefully that's helpful. Like if you can build this out, and this is kind of how we go and we do appeals to get more money. So TCU, we would try, but we also need to know what you're working with. Like Notre Dame, they gave you Their money, it's all need based. You know, Villanova the same. There's no, they don't have, I mean, with some exceptions, but they'll love to have you. It's full pay, and you're gonna have a $2,400 a month payment. Go Irish.
Yeah.
So, and be cautious of this too, because people say, "Oh, you don't need to pay them in 10 years. You can stretch them out for 25." When you look at the cost of that loan, yes, you can cut your payment in half, but you're going to pay another $130,000 for that privilege and be in debt until you're 50. So I'd rather you go spend that money on grad school. Because if you can get into these schools, you're likely going to grad school.
Yep.
Very likely. And you got some great choices on this list. You're going to get a great education. So, at a lot of these places. So,
Yes. The
um,
challenge we run into so often is families, they often have SAIs that are relatively high, like in the 200s or 300s, and they want to pay the premium for the highly selective education, but you're paying the full amount for that. And it is
mhm,
a significant stretch. Now, if your SAI is lower, a lot of these schools, we're talking the Notre Dames, we're talking the Harvards, we're talking the Princetons, they have so much money for need-based aid, but that is where they're focused. They're looking at families that have high need.
mhm,
200K that you can afford out of pocket according to their SAI per year is not high need in their eyes.
mhm. Yeah, and they don't care where you live. Like working with people across the country, if you live in California or Boston or New York, like you're gonna make more money by default. They don't care. Other people that they seem penalized. It's just how the formula works. Or those that have like non-retirement, they've chose to invest in real estate. They get hit pretty hard in the formulas. Doesn't mean that they're wealthy, but it just means that that's where their nest egg is in a lot of cases. And unfortunately, the formulas don't really care. So it's yeah. So knowing the profile of the schools, to your point of like, well, how do they do with need-based aid? How many kids get scholarships? Well, next to none. Most of those scholarships are athletic at Villanova, and the same at Notre Dame. So even though it may say some kids we have some, but it's just highly unlikely. But need-based aid, they'll do pretty good. Notre Dame would do even better, and the question for a lot of families comes if we're still in this process, how do you find those schools? That's where our the tools come in to say like how do you search? I set up a search for medium-sized schools that are private schools, and this show me the schools that'll give me the most merit scholarship money. That's how I would build your competition list. Who's closest to them? So if you're targeting, what's your target school, and then who's closest, and then who do they play in their sports league? Is usually another one we'll put them against. So like a lot of these are up in New York. So you apply to a lot of them. They're going to give you these are automatic. So that's kind of and you can kind of see where our net cost begins to stretch. So hopefully that's
We have
helpful.
we have a couple good questions, Joe, that kind of hit on some of the things you just said. I don't know how many more slides you have, so I don't want to interject with the questions if you've got a few more points to cover because you might answer the questions.
I think I'm good. I mean, I think this was kind of the before and after here and the special circumstance. So I think that's pretty much what I had to cover tonight. So
Okay.
I
Excellent.
think we're good.
Okay. So do you want to take a minute, say kind of what you were just sharing on that slide about your services and support, and then I'll hit you with the questions.
Yeah, so if you're interested in a meeting for a session, we'll send out a link and it'll be if you want to go through, if you're at this point, you want to go through those and set up that and then help me create, if you would like help creating your appeal and comparing all those side by side, that we'll offer a discounted session tomorrow. So uh, it'll probably could we have pretty good. I can't guarantee results on appeals. Nobody can. If they say they can, run hard and
Yeah.
fast. But if you feel like you've got a good appeal or you're not sure, did we get a good offer? That's another thing that I start with. Like, is it worth the time and the energy to do an appeal? And sometimes it's just not. It's not worth it because I know the school's not going to consider it. Like Ohio State is not going to consider an appeal because you got a better offer from a school that's not as at their caliber. It's just not going to happen. So stuff like that.
Well, and it's a public institution. Like there's a lot of layers to if a school is even going to work with you on an appeal. Um,
Correct.
so one of the questions that I think I can pseudo answer, and then I'd be curious to hear your response, is how do you assess what schools are peer schools to recognize if you have a competing offer with other peer schools? And One way would be what Joe just showed. He actually has proprietary software that he developed because this was a huge hole in the market 10, 15 years ago. Nothing existed where you could really get into the nitty-gritty and see like where those peer schools were, what percentage of students were receiving scholarships, merit scholarships, what the average was. Did those students also have need or did they not? And
Mhm.
Joe really kind of was first on the scene to come up with a tool that he was just showing you. So yes, that is like you're paying a professional to help you assess the side by side. There are, like a lot of things, there are DIY ways to do it. You're simply
Mhm.
going to be probably taking more time and digging into things you're not as familiar with to try and extract the right information. The big picture way you could do it DIY would be to look at the common data set that most, not all, most schools participate in. There's lines there. I think it's in section H. That's the financial aid section. And you can go through, I mean, it's pretty overwhelming if you've never looked at a common data set, which is why Joe's software pulls all that information. But you can kind of get a sense of if your student's offer was in the average range, but it's just dealing in averages. It's not giving you a sense of students with these GPA test score, this academic profile got this average scholarship versus this student with this average scholarship. The other one that would be a DIY is called Tuition Fit. And Tuition Fit is your student would have to make an account. It's free, but they make an account. And it's kind of a crowdsourced platform where to participate, students have to upload copies of their award letters. Obviously, you would redact like identifying information. And then once they've done that, they now can see other award letters from students from multiple universities all across the country. And you can kind of see and compare, like, oh, a student with a GPA and these test scores got something like this at this university versus I got this from the same school. So you can do it that way too. It's again, like there's a lot of context that will be missing when you're going DIY because you don't get to know what the competing offer, what those students' backstories were that led to that offer. So those are the
Yeah.
DIY ways um, if you wanted to go that longer route.
Yeah. And our free college money report too. So our free version allows it'll give you three schools side by side.
Yep.
So it'll give you your student aid index. It'll show you, are you eligible for need-based aid? It's not, and it'll show you, here's their average, some of the averages, but it'll actually project, would you or should you have gotten a scholarship from this school? And so if you're looking, that's a way to just like put three schools in. You have to provide the schools, but it'll give you what your net cost would be, what your scholarship or aid package would be, an estimate for each, to see if you got a fair package to start, and then see which schools maybe you should compete with them. So, and I just
Um,
started the key there too is like what's a similar starting price. So going to a school that costs 50,000 as their starting price, you're not going to be able to go to a school that costs 85. So you want to find a school that's in the within 5,000 of the sticker price. That's another thing, just like to have that competitive appeal really makes sense because they're saying, hey, it's kind of apples to apples. You're both in a similar quality of school. You only offer me 25. They offer me 35. So finding that out. So that's good.
we had a couple other ones, both in the same vein, asking why your philosophy of having the student lead the process in the appeals. Why the student? Why would that be important?
Well, it's the student's education, and part of that's from experience. Parents oftentimes would reach out, but there are also rules in place that the student needs to be the one communicating, and especially once they go off to college, the FERPA rules they're called. I won't get into it, but like there are legal reasons that the parents can't do certain things as well. I know that sounds strange, but there are some actual things in place legally because there have, as you can imagine, people that have abused the system, got aid, stole loan money from kids without their kids knowing it. So there are rules in place, and so part of it's a passion thing, but part of it is there is some actual. They're the ones applying for aid. They're the ones that should show the passion. We understand that a lot of us, we we live in bubble communities where, parents are going to pay for most of the bill, and that's part of it. So having supporting documentation, copying parents, but I just that's they respond much better. A lot of times they just don't even respond to
Yeah,
parents.
I will say, I mean, while your student is still a senior and they're wrapping up school and, also trying to negotiate all this financial aid stuff, I think I have advised families like it's perfectly appropriate if you, as the parent, if you have to get on a phone call and have a
Yeah.
conversation with someone, like your kid, unless they're like some future finance major, they don't know the lingo. And that's totally appropriate for a parent to be making that phone call. And honestly, if you kind of tell your student, if you're going to do an email, tell your student what to email and then send it from the student's email.
Hmm.
And then that way, as Joe said, like your student might get a much more prompt and more warm response if they're seen as taking, charge of their education.
Yeah, and a little bit of it's like our family, like our family. We've sat down, we've talked about this. So phrasing it like we together have kind of looked at this, and sometimes there could be a little good cop, bad cop there. Like my folks have said unless there's these dollars, it's just not going to be feasible. And then, sometimes it results in a phone call and, getting your case, so, I think that's figure it out, get your advocate. And if they're willing to talk to you, have that conversation, absolutely usually it results in a joint call anyway with one of the parents and the student. So that's
Yep,
usually where it eventually gets there if they want to go beyond just documentation.
yep. And I'd say last one that came through, any resources that you know off the top of your head for students who want to go to school internationally, specifically the EU, um, kind of what you were showing us with the side-by-side comparisons, getting everything on, apples to apples across the lines. Is there something like that that helps with schools that are not domestic?
Excuse me. Continue to get the question, but I really don't have a great resource for it. I don't know if you do, but I really don't.
We
Uh,
don't. What we've had to do in the past is truly like do conversions, like just put it into US dollars to make it again
mhm.
apples to apples. Like students in going to a school in another country, if it is not a American-based institution, i.e., like a school that has campuses
Sister
in other
school. Well,
countries,
yeah, so,
yeah, or a sister school. Usually those students don't qualify then for any financial aid. They might get scholarships, merit scholarships from the school, but they're not going to get federal United States need-based aid
mhm.
if they are a citizen going to college out of the country, unless it's an American campus that's in another country.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you'll probably have to do the conversions to make it side by side.
yeah. And I just cost just in some research and having gone through schools. There's so many different models out there, one country to the next, and even certain schools within those countries. Like Scotland has become popular, but and England, but some of their top schools, there's their lower level schools are very affordable, if not close to free, but some of their top schools are still quite expensive.
Well, in
So,
a lot of colleges internationally, the residential college where students live on campus and they eat there, they sleep there, they live there, that is not as widely common
standard, yeah.
internationally. So families can get really drawn into like the price tag when you're looking at that, but that is just tuition.
Hmm.
Students then have to account for food and housing in off-campus places.
Yeah, yeah. Good question though.
Yeah,
Maybe that's my next endeavor.
yeah, we're always learning.
Well, if there are no other questions, we're good to go.
Nope, that was it. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. We'll have the recording out and resources, links, and all that stuff. So thank you all for being here.
Thank
And
you.
Amber, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.